Hi, I'm Molly. I'm Molly DeBlanc. Uh, I've done some stuff. I'm here to talk to you about some of the stuff I've done. Um, I'm talking specifically about medical devices, personal autonomy, and the right to repair, and the way that these things interact with each other. I'm also trying to start my clock on my phone so I can keep track of how long I take. Um, Great. There. Now. Good. Um, I have an email address. It's molly.deblanc@eff.org. If you have any questions that we don't figure out how to answer today, you can also reach me at mdb@kith.kitchen. That's my Mastodon account. I figured maybe the bird site wasn't the thing to be spousing at the moment. I'm not really sure. Figuring that one out. But the Mastodon is mostly pictures of my cat and things I have cooked. So tread there with your own warning. Um, Let me change my screen up there. This is better. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about medical devices. I love talking about medical devices because I think they're super cool. I think it's incredible that we have developed technologies that can compensate for like necessary bodily functions that don't exist anymore. Um, I'm talking about things like insulin pumps and artificial pancreas systems. There are pacemaker defibrillators. There are deep neuromodulation devices which can shock your brain or parts of your brain when they don't work in the right ways. There are optical implants. There are bionic limbs. I don't know a lot about bionic limbs. I've just started recently getting interested in them. Um, I think medical devices are super cool because we have created technologies that interface with and interact with our bodies in these incredibly intricate and intimate ways. And it can teach us so much about the way that we can think about technology, that we should think about technology in general. Um, so when I want to talk about medical devices today, I'm doing so with this thought that we can talk about them in the specific case, and then we can say, okay, how can we generalize, like, out of these, not just as a medical device, but out of like an insulin pump as a technology, what can we say about other technologies from that? Um, and just to be clear, when I say medical device, like crutches are a medical device, glasses are a medical device, but mostly what I'm talking about, exclusively what I'm talking about, are things with computers in them. Um, so things that are like computers that also happen to do other things. They measure your blood glucose levels. They, regulate insulin in your body. They shock your brainstem. All sorts of good stuff. Um, I wanted to also, because I'm talking a lot about autonomy, I wanted to kind of provide a bit of a definition of autonomy. And I guess I should also maybe provide a little context about why I think I'm allowed to talk about autonomy. I've spent the past 2 years doing research around autonomy and medical devices, um, and ethical issues in medical devices at New York University. So I'm really excited to be able to be sharing some of that here today. Um, Generally, when I talk about autonomy, I think about self-governance, which is a fancy way of saying that the controlling, making your own decisions, controlling what you're doing. Um, we can talk about autonomy as a right. We can talk about it as an entitlement. We could talk about it as a thing that we all just actually do. Um, so within this, like the next, I don't know, 15 minutes, we're going to talk about autonomy as something that you lose and autonomy as something that you gain. Um, so there are cases where you lose the ability to have agency, to have control over the decisions you're making. And we're especially going to be talking about that in relation to your body. So not being able to make decisions about what's happening within your body and why that matters. So medical devices retain our autonomy, but they also take it away. So, I take off my glasses, like I have this loss of functionality. Like I just, I can't, that was a terrible idea. I can't see my screen anymore. Great. Now I can see it again. So by being able to see better with my glasses on, I'm able to have more, I'm able to make decisions from a better, more informed, more functional place, which is great. Um, but when we have these medical devices that are computers, we're also giving up certain amounts of autonomy because we're allowing different things. We're allowing these devices to interact with our bodies, to have certain types of control over our bodies. Um, and I want to talk about that by kind of giving an example of something else. um, so let's say you're going to SFO and you have a lot of baggage with you, and you are like, well, I'm going to take a car to get there. So you call up a car company, and uh, then somebody comes, you make a deal with the driver, and you say, like, okay, I want to go to SFO. And the driver says, okay, I'll take you. It'll cost you this much money. Now, once you're in the car, though, you're giving up a certain amount of autonomy. You're giving up a certain amount of control, right? The driver now has the opportunity to decide where you go, actually, how fast you get there, the route you take, what music you're listening to. Um, so now they have a certain control over your experience, and an opportunity to actually even make decisions kind of about your destiny, right? Like, they'll get you to SFO because they said they would, and you're trusting them and they're trusting you. But how long is that going to take? Are they going to take the route that you like to take? Are they going to take you on a less idealized route? Are they actually just not going to take you to SFO? Maybe you'll miss your flight. Who knows? There's another version of this where instead of thinking about a cab and a driver, we think about a self-driving car. Um, and with the self-driving car, you're giving up what you're giving up is a little bit different, because the interaction that you're making now is not you talking to a person, it's you talking to a machine. And the machine is the thing that are making those decisions. So the autonomy that you had, rather than handing it over to someone else, you're handing it over to this agent. Well, is it an agent even? You're handing it over to a piece of technology. So I think about medical devices kind of in the same way, actually, which is when you are getting a medical device, you're not just ceding certain amounts of control over yourself to another person, you're actually also giving it to a piece of technology that is, in a sense, a stand-in for another person. Right? So technology, right? It's a stand-in between technology is a stand-in between you and another person. So in this case, the person would be the device manufacturer. When we're talking about medical devices, device manufacturers are really important to think about when you're thinking about medical devices, because they're the people who are making all the decisions about how something works. Right? Medical devices are controlled and designed by others. These types of design choices are things like how it works, where the base components are manufactured, what kinds of components it uses. There are decisions about what sorts of interfaces that are being built into a device, the types of, like, how does your insulin pump talk to the app on your phone? What does the app on your phone look like? Who's it designed for? What are the values that are being put into that design? So that's one level of control that these people have. They have control over your experience of your device. Another level of control that they have is of the device itself and how it functions. There is this way of control that comes by, there's a type of control that comes by way of policies that surround the device. This can be legal policies, the way the FDA regulates different kinds of medical devices, or it can come from things like privacy policies or data policies or storage policies or repair policies. And then there's also this type of control that comes from manufacturers having the ability to do updates to devices. So the way that this can looks in most of the types of medical device cases that I think about is like somebody comes and somebody updates the software on your device, and that can be through firmware. It could be different kinds of functional software. So these are like ways that a person is interfering with this technology that in turn is interfering with your body. So the device and the people behind them impact your bodily autonomy, right? They're acting on you. They're doing things to your body that would not be okay for someone to do if you didn't decide it like was okay to let them do it, right? So we would generally agree as a society that if I was to step out into traffic, you could grab me and keep me from, falling off the subway platform. But we wouldn't say that it's okay for you to, reach into my chest and, pump my heart without, asking nicely first. So these are different. So devices impact your body. People impact the devices. Through the device, somebody is affecting your body, and that affects your ability to control your destiny of what's happening with your body. Kind of the insidious side here, that the thing that's scary for me to think about is this idea that device manufacturers, you're making a deal with them, they're going to take you to SS, like the way you're making the deal with the driver to take you to SFO, but they don't really have to do that. And if they do it, they might not do it in the ways you want them to do it. So overall, this is a loss of autonomy, and losing autonomy is a bad thing. Like, there are some things that we just kind of agree are bad things, and losing autonomy is one of them. There are practical reasons behind this, we can say. So earlier today, actually, I was talking to someone about the optical implant company Second Sight that had created an implant to help people with certain types of blindness see. They went under, before they went under, they'd been planning a software update, and then the software update didn't happen. So some people have lost access to their devices. Like their optical implants aren't working in the ways that they were promised they would, aren't working in the ways that they're supposed to be. So they've lost this like kind of functionality. And losing that functionality is like, it's a bad thing, but it's also like losing the control that they would have had over themselves. That somebody else got to make the decision about what was happening in their bodies. So I think there's something that can be done about this. And I think that's a right to repair. I label this option 1. Option 2 is like total revolution. But I couldn't find a good Creative Commons picture of Revolutionary Girl Utna. So I kind of scrapped that whole plan. Break the world from its shell. Anyway, that was unintended digression. So I think by implementing a right to repair in medical devices, we are creating opportunities for people to have control, to regain autonomy of their bodies by being able to determine what happens with the device. So what this can mean is, for like looking at the optical implant example, when you have someone who has an implant that doesn't work the way that they need it to, because it like didn't get a software update that was necessary, you then, if you have the right to repair, you have the opportunity to make the software update yourself. So that is, in one sense, like autonomy into itself is exerting your agency over your body, and creating a dynamic that works better for you and this device that's interacting with you. When I talk about right to repair, I talk about it as saying, like, if a device doesn't work the way you need it to, or it doesn't work the way you want it to, right? So let's say that you're using an insulin pump, and the dashboard, the way that data sharing on the dashboard for it doesn't work very well if you need to share your blood glucose level data with a family member who also helps manage your health. Great. Well, you should be able to make that change to something that will allow you those sharing options that will better integrate with the people who like need to be part of your care team. That's a pretty broad definition of right to repair, actually. And you can easily just say it's like, it's a right to tinker, it's a right to modify. And I think that's true. I just think right to repair has really good branding. I'm a big fan of alliteration. But I think there is something like essentially important in this idea that like repair is not only returning something to the state in which a device manufacturer intended when like the device manufacturer handed you a device, right? Like we can get things that are still fundamentally broken because they still fundamentally violate our autonomy by not like interacting with us in the ways that they need to. Just because something works the way it's intended doesn't mean it works well or it works correctly or it works rightly or justly. So by being able to exert a right to repair, by being able to repair, to modify, to tinker, to change, to make devices that are interacting with our bodies work the way we need them to, we are regaining autonomy of our bodies. So quick review before we switch gears in the next 5 minutes. You have a medical device. It does things to your body that is not okay, or would not be okay if we didn't say it was okay for them to do that. We've ceded control. We've ceded our autonomy. We've ceded our governance to another person, which is a device manufacturer. Then we say, okay, well, what we can do then is if we allow people to not have to rely on device manufacturers as the only people who can control their devices, we then have the opportunity to have more autonomy over ourselves. Now, this is where I'm going to start saying some other kinds of stuff now. So I talked about devices as a thing that interact with our bodies, but they can also be a part of our bodies, right? I'm asking you to think about how you interact with your phone or your Twitter account or your Instagram or the pictures that you take. And, just see how you think about how you relate to those technologies. It's called like extended mind, if you want to talk specifically about like cognitive abilities, but just this idea that like your phone is like maybe not just a device that you have, but it's actually kind of a part of you. And it's kind of a part of how you think about the world and how you interact with the world. It's a lens through which you interact with the world. Or maybe it's actually like a way that you're storing your memories and you're storing a part of yourself in it. I think in general, like we can talk about technologies as how they relate to us in different ways. In my reading about insulin pumps, one particular account that stuck out to me was a 15-year-old who talked about how his insulin pump was a gadget. It was like some gadget he didn't like that he had to be attached to all the time. And that, that's like certainly that's one experience someone has had. And I've also read about people with prosthetic limbs talking about their limb as a part of their body, and people who talk about it as an extension of their body. So we have this whole range that we can think about technology in general, right? A technology can be literally a part of us. It could be a place where we're storing a part of ourselves, or it can be something we use. But in any of these cases, it's still like the technology is interacting with who we are, and the technology might be who we are. And if it's a part of us, then somebody interfering with it is interfering with us. So by repairing, like, so this right to repair means we have a say on our lives, right? So this is kind of the more general point I was thinking about, which is that if we can return bodily autonomy through a medical device, what does it mean if we can also repair a device that is doing something else but still interacting with our lives in a very intricate way? And I think that in those cases, we have increased autonomy that comes from like increased agency over the things that are interacting with our lives. That was a lot. And, I have some thoughts about things that we can do to protect autonomy, because I think a lot of the problems that come with how we interact with technology in general is that technologies don't view people as autonomous. And one of the ways that we need to view people as autonomous is we need to respect their ability to modify the technologies around them. So we can design and build with repair in mind. So, you know, this can mean a lot of different things. I think about projects that just like go through, like coding projects that just go through and produce things that have like easy to read code and nice documentation. That means it's like easier to install it or change it or modify it or just understand what's going on with it so you can make decisions about whether something is right for you. Building things with parts that like using screws that like are easy to have the correct screwdriver for, like that's a big step and makes a big difference. You can also advocate for the right to repair. I had in my notes like this whole thing about talking about ventilators. I think ventilators are really cool and are like a really great example of why right to repair like is really important in medicine in general. That's a little bit different than like the kinds of medical devices that are interacting directly with the body or that are a part of the body. But right to repair is really important. I have some thoughts about some stuff happening in New York State, if you want to talk about New York State and right to repair. But advocacy, both in terms of like codifying rights within law, as well as like making sure that companies and respect those things and are building, even if they're not being required to do so, is like a really great thing that you can do. So in quick summary, because I kind of went a bunch of places, when a technology intimately interacts with our lives, we hand autonomy over to that technology. We hand some of our definition of ourself and our definition of our destiny over to a technology which somebody else is controlling, right? Directly and indirectly. When we're able to repair technologies that control our lives, we're able to take back some of that autonomy and create better lives and futures for ourselves. So that's what I have. That's my email. It's my thing. These have been a bunch of albatross pictures, by the way. I recently learned that there's a bird called a mollyhawk, and I've decided I need to rebrand. Mollyhawks are albatrosses. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Sorry, if anybody has questions, raise your hand. We're going to give you a mic, and then I can repeat your question to Molly so that she can answer it. Any questions? No? Oh, yes, we got one.
Hey, how's it going? I was curious about sort of the intersection between these medical devices and the ideas of like human organs in general.
Okay, hold on a second.
Yeah.
He was asking about the intersection of these medical devices and human organs in general. And
Yeah, because I work at a hotel and there's a lot of medical conventions and they're talking about, you know, organ transplantation and stuff like that. So I was curious.
he's at a lot of conventions where they're talking a lot about organ transplantation, transplants, and things like that. And then his question is,
At what point does a medical device like basically become an organ, and what does that mean in terms of like bodily autonomy and your ownership of it?
okay, at what point does a medical device basically become an organ, and what does that mean in terms of autonomy?
That's a great question. I would love to do a project on that. I have my own theories. Some other people have some other theories. I think a lot of that I personally believe a lot of that comes down to a case by case basis of what a person believes. Helena de Priester, who I believe is Dutch, is a philosopher, talks about a technology retreating into the like and becoming a part of the sensory motor apparatus of the body. So a lot of people who have talked about, well, a lot of the reading I have done around like phenomenology of prosthetics and the experience of prosthetics relates to like if you stop noticing something isn't a part of your body, then it is a part of your body. When it retracts like or withdraws, that's when it's like it's an organ. I I'm really interested, like right now I'm super interested in the types of like social, political, and legal implications of thinking about medical devices not as objects of ownership but as body parts. So I think that's a really cool question, and I'm excited to know your thoughts on it too.
Is there anybody else that has a question that they'd like to ask? Oh, we got one.
Hello. The Obama administration started funding research under the BRAIN Initiative through DARPA, the Defense.
Just a second. Under the what initiative?
The BRAIN Initiative.
Oh, okay. Initiative started funding what through the BRAIN Initiative? I'm sorry.
They started funding brain research.
Okay.
And it was funded under the umbrella of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA.
Okay.
And so this is an agency that is responsible for creating weapons for war.
And the internet, yes.
Yeah, and the internet, of course. And so, so I understand that there are some therapeutic applications for this brain research.
Question was actually, what are the implications, or I'm not sure.
Well, I'm trying to keep it short enough so I know you have to repeat it to her.
No, I need to repeat it to her or whatever you say, so don't worry about that part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one aspect is that this brain research does have therapeutic applications. For example, to treat soldiers that experience PTSD from war.
All right, great. Continue.
And another application that I've heard about is, for example, it could make the enemy, for example, docile and have them lay down their arms.
Yeah.
Okay, and
yeah, so I'd like to hear her thoughts on this as far as bodily autonomy is concerned.
Those are good questions. I mean, I have a lot of feelings about those things. You're gonna get some raw reactions to them. You know, I'm like kind of not into war, so I don't like the idea of enemies and having developed technologies against enemies. I mean, I don't know I know very, very little about war ethics and war theory and just war theory. I think if you want to take like the perspective that, you know, whatever stops the war quickest is what's best, then like, yeah, if you can just like get enemies to put down their weapons, then there's probably some like consequentialist good in developing that sort of technology. Dealing with things like questions like, so you have PTSD from anything really, including being in war. What kinds of interaction, like how like ways to treat that are like quick and easy, right? Like what do those mean? I think that's a really interesting question. I know that there's discussion around people who say things like, well, you know, you're doing someone a disservice actually, because like to just like wipe away trauma is like doesn't like being a person who is traumatized is a person like that's part of who you are. And to just wipe that away is not respectful of a part of yourself, or a part of that person's self, like for a third party to do that to you. I don't I don't know what to say about like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, right? Like, can you just wipe away trauma? I think an easy answer for me to say is like, well, I think those are the kinds of things people need to be able to determine for themselves. But to like maybe lean kind of hard into some stuff here, you know, we make their content warning. I'm gonna say a few things about medically assisted suicide real quick, which is that when there is legal opportunity for things, there are people who feel pressure to undertake those options because they're easy. Actually, I'm going to replace my example. A very like innocuous example is there was recently from like Reddit relationships, a thing that made its way around the internet of a woman who felt pressured to get a nose job by her fiance, and then she did it, and it was a choice she had. Like, obviously she made the choice, like arguably she made the choice herself, but she felt pressure to do it and regretted it. So saying that somebody has the right to make decisions about what's best for them is like really lovely, and it's something that I think is very like it's something that's easy to say, but there are social pressures involved that make something that might seem like an autonomous decision to not actually be an autonomous one.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, all right. I'm just happy we were able to ask some questions. Sorry for the sort of Zoom hack that we had to do here, but it worked. Yes? You have oh good, we do have a question. Okay, one more question.
So I was wondering about, like, in your research, if you found anything in the legal realm with medical devices specifically and right to repair, if there are any laws yet, like going one way or another, like if you have the ability.
That's a great question that I don't have an answer to, and I really should have an immediate answer to. I remember early in the pandemic, I feel like such a philosopher right now. I'm like, oh, practical things. Who knows about those? I know early in the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about early in the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of discussion around repurposing certain types of CPAP machines, which are used to help deliver oxygen to people who snore and have sleep apnea. At least that's how I understand them. I might be wrong. Into ventilation, like more traditional ventilation devices. And that there were tensions where some device manufacturers were saying like, you can't do that. So that's, I'm gonna learn that right after I hang up this call.
Is that a yes or a no? I'm sorry, I can't.
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
I know that some right to repair provisions very specifically did not include medical devices though. So.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, let's have a round of applause for Molly.